Washington can start the year 5-1 with a win over Rutgers. Here's how they can do it with some keys to the game.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And this episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward, Mazda, Move and Be Move. Just a quick reminder to all you everydayers out there, wherever you get this podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever that might be, make sure to click that subscribe button, click that little bell as well. You should never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you're on the audio only side of things, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help the channel out a lot. Now, as all you everydayers know, I got a really exciting Keys to the Game show coming at you today. We're going to talk some bold predictions at the end, one of my very favorite segments that we do on the show every single week. Talk about some defensive keys to the game. But as always, we start on the offensive side, because as you are listening to this on this Friday, Washington is suiting up for a matchup against the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. Like I said, an opportunity to move to 5-1 on the season. And when I look at this offensive matchup against Rutgers, there's only one way to say this. And as the world's biggest jinx, I apologize in advance for this. So when this is like a 7-3 game going into the fourth quarter, this is a bad Rutgers defense. Some of these numbers are just straight up unlike most Greg Schiano coach teams. There's no other way to put it. They're number 15 right now in the Big Ten Conference, allowing 25.4 points per game. Number 13, allowing 346.4 yards per game. Get to some of these other numbers in a few minutes here as we get to more of these keys. But this is the number one thing for me. And I was talking about this with our good buddy Jake Butt earlier in the week. I don't care that Rutgers is coming off a bye, because taking a cross-country flight like that, the numbers are still heavily not in the favor of the team that does have to make that 2, in this case 3 time zones just travel to get to this game. And you look at, some of the injuries that Washington is going to be dealing with. Doesn't sound like Carver Willis is going to be able to suit up in this game. I don't know if John Mills is going to be able to suit up in this game. And you're starting a pair of backups where Paki Fee now has been listed as an or starter all season long at left guard, but you're starting a backup at left tackle, Maximus McCree. The number one thing in this game is don't let this bad Rutgers defense take advantage of any of your injuries or any of your weak points with a couple of backups in the game. I don't mean that to sound harsh, but that is probably going to be what the game plan is, because that's what it was for Maryland last week. And they had a much better pass rush with Zahir Mathis and Sidney Stewart. Obviously, we saw what happened with both those guys in that game. But they were going after especially Maximus McCree early and often in this game. That's something you cannot have happen against Rutgers. Rutgers is number 17 in the conference with sacks. They have tallied just 8 sacks this season. Washington's offensive line has had its struggles. Allowing 6 sacks against Ohio State is what it is. And we saw a couple against Maryland this past week too. But this is not a game where you can allow Demond Williams to get sacked more than, let's say, twice. And even that might be looked at as by the coaching staff at the end of the game as an unacceptable number. Because when you have a quarterback like this who can get out of the pocket, you can do so many different things with a pass rush that is not hitting home, you need to make sure this is a clean pocket. Because you look at, again, some of these other numbers like the points per game. This Rutgers defense has fallen apart late in games against both Minnesota and Iowa, their first 2 Big Ten opponents. So there are going to be plenty of opportunities to take advantage of this team. And we saw how Washington looked in the first half after that 4.5-hour flight to get to Maryland. If Rutgers looks the same, I can't say I'd be shocked, because that's just the way this conference has been with some of these teams making long flights this year. So and it's like we talked about on yesterday's show, you have an opportunity to attack this Rutgers team early and often, and you need to do that, and you need to assert your will in this game, which you can in several different ways. Now, another number 13 in total defense, but when you look at CFBstats.com, Rutgers is 12th in the Big Ten in passing yards allowed at 218.4, and they're 12th in the Big Ten in rushing yards allowed at 128.2. So this isn't like, Demond Williams needs to drop back and throw 40 times to put up 350 yards and beat this team. Or Jonah Coleman needs 27 carries and 145 yards, whatever, and a couple of touchdowns to beat this team. No, you can run the same offense that you have been, a very balanced attack which we saw last year, Jedd Fisch's offensive scheme works against this Greg Schiano defense. They put up 520 yards on what I believe is a much more talented defense than what Rutgers is rolling out there this year. So I look at those numbers and I think that there are several different ways for Washington to take advantage of this. I wouldn't be surprised if DeMond does drop back and throw 30, 35 times in this game, because once we saw him settle in that second half against Maryland, the precision passing that he was able to just achieve at all three levels of the field is something that's really exciting. This could be one of those really big games for Denzel Boston. And if we see DeMond continue to incorporate Desmond Roebuck, Raiden Vinesbright, Decker DeGraff, these are all things that you can do and establish this passing game early and often, because I feel like with a back like Jonah Coleman and what he's been able to do so far this season, the plan early might be to make sure you can contain him. So if DeMond says, okay, you're going to give me one-on-one coverage on the outside with Denzel Boston, I'm going to take advantage of that. I'm going to take advantage of, you're playing a soft zone on the back end and Decker DeGraff is just running an 8-yard curl for me. Whatever it might be, there are several different ways to take advantage of this Rutgers defense. And unlike most games where you can come in with the plan of, oh, I know, this defense has been much more lax in this area, there are several different ways to take advantage of this matchup. And a lot of it just comes down to, again, scoring early and scoring often. Because if this Rutgers team gets in a hole, I'll talk about the defense in a couple of minutes here, I don't know if they have the firepower to come back. Athan Kaliakmanis has been tremendous this season, but I don't think that he is going to be the guy that in Husky Stadium, coming off of just this long flight, that he's going to be able to guide to, if you get a 2-possession lead, to lead this Rutgers team back. So if you're able to post all these points early on, and of course, keep the gas pedal on late in the Big Ten, you never want to, take a lead for granted in this conference. I think that Washington has a solid chance to open the season at 5-1, because again, there are so many weapons that you could turn to. And I think that the read option is going to be something that I'm going to be watching heavily in this game, because like I said, Rutgers is 12th in the Big Ten in rushing yards allowed per contest as well. So there are going to be several opportunities to take advantage of this team on the ground. And I don't think we have seen the full might of what DeMond Williams as a rusher might look like yet this season. We've seen him have some big games, obviously the Apple Cup being the number one example, but this can be one of those games where I feel like if Greg Schiano is going to look at what Jonah Coleman is, what he brings to the table, they might say, okay, we need to crash on him. And then all of a sudden, DeMond just pulls it on the read option, is getting 6, 7, 8 yards, which we saw him do very efficiently in this game last season. And the other thing that it really is going to come down to, and I know we talked about this a little bit on yesterday's show as well, I just wanted to give some extra numbers on it, is converting in the red zone. This Rutgers defense is 16th in the Big Ten in red zone conversions allowed. They've allowed 18 scoring drives on 19 possessions inside the 20-yard line. 14 of those have ended in touchdowns. And this is obviously what killed the Huskies in last year's game. We saw a couple of missed field goals. I certainly have more faith in Grady Gross this season after we've seen him just get better protection in front of him. We've seen an increased emphasis on special teams with hiring a pair of coaches to run that side of the ball, really. And if you do get stopped in the red zone, where Rutgers has been okay, it's one of the better stats we can throw out here, where they're 10th in the Big Ten, allowing 38.3% conversion rate on third down, you can turn to Grady and he could have a nice day for you. But I look at this game and I think Washington has the ability to get up early and establish themselves, because there's just so many different ways that you can take advantage of a defense like this and assert your will with what has proven to be one of the best offenses in the Big Ten so far this season. And I'm really excited to see what that could look like, because again, there are so many weapons to turn to, and I don't think Rutgers has the horses, whether it be on the outside of cornerback or even in the front seven, to deal with what DeMond Williams and Jonah Coleman, Denzel Boston, and the rest of this offense are bringing to the table. And it really is as simple as that. You have an opportunity to, I think, improve on your scoring average of 39.4 points per game so far this season. Will they get there? I'll save that for bold predictions at the end of the show. But for now, it is time to switch sides of the ball and talk about the defense. Right after a message from our good friends over at DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. Time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For Washington, DeMond Williams delivered in the big way with a pair of fourth quarter touchdowns, 130 passing yards in the quarter to lead that comeback win over Maryland. When the pressure was on, he came through, no hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, this performance performance wasn't a fluke. DeMond is on a streak. And just like DeMond delivered for the Huskies, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you can save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday, keep the streak alive, fuel your game day, only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through November 18th. We've also got a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love how FanDuel gives me so many ways to play. I build parlays, try player props, and even follow the live lines during games. It makes watching football even more exciting when you've got a little something riding on the action. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats just like I do, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. As we switch sides of the ball here, I'm really intrigued by this matchup, honestly, even more so than the other one, because it's a case where Washington should have a significant advantage in that matchup. When I look at Rutgers offense versus Washington's defense, this unit has been really solid this year. Like I said, Athan Kaliakmanis has been really, really good so far. He's number 2 in the Big Ten right now, averaging 279.8 passing yards per game. He's also got a 9-2 touchdown to interception ratio. So he's done a really good job protecting the ball. And this has led Rutgers to be the number 6 offense in the Big Ten in terms of points per game. They're scoring 39 points per contest. And this is where a lot of this just intrigue comes from me, because we've seen Washington have some okay performances on defense, and you go out there and you do a solid job against Ohio State, but then there are some struggles. You look at the first half against Maryland, you look at the majority of that game against Washington State as well. The defense has certainly been a bit of a roller coaster this year, and I think this is the game, where we're going to be able to look back on this at the end of the night and say, all right, is this a good unit? Is this an average unit? Is this a unit that we got to be really worried about? Because there are things that you can point to when I look at the Ohio State game and say, all right, it's fair that you can question this or that because of what Ohio State did. Against Maryland, I would say the same thing. That offense, led by Malik Washington, I was so impressed with what he was able to do. I look at this Rutgers offense, and I think that Athan Kaliakmanis is certainly a really solid player. He's really risen a lot in terms of his draft stock over the last, I want to just say 6-7 months or so, because he's really impressed with his ability to make tight window throws. And against this Ryan Walters defense, with or without Tacario Davis, I think that that's what they're going to want to force him to do, is make these tight window throws downfield to a trio of receivers that have been really solid this season. I wouldn't say I've been wowed by what they've been able to do. And I think Washington has the bodies in the secondary, especially if Tacario Davis is able to suit up, to counter them to a solid degree. Where I am concerned about Washington in this matchup is on third down. And with a back like Antwan Raymond, who I want to talk about here in just a second, I think that this is where this game is really going to be decided. Because right now, Washington is 15th in the conference in third down conversion rate allowed at 43.08%. Not great. So if you're able to keep Rutgers out of some of these third and short scenarios and force Athan Kaliakmanis to make these tight window throws on a consistent basis, if he beats you that way, he beats you that way. And I think Ryan Walters would be able to live with that. I don't think he'd be happy by any stretch of the imagination, but it's certainly a lot better than getting into 3rd and 2 and 3rd and 3, handing the ball to Antwan Raymond, who, again, has been really solid this year. And, he picked it up on 3 yards in a cloud of dust, especially with an offensive line that has not been great this year. Walters mentioned it during his Tuesday press conference that they've been together a long time. It's certainly a very experienced group. Well, that doesn't mean that it's been good, especially in a pass rush scenario. This offensive line is 17th in the Big Ten. They've allowed 17 sacks this season. Not great. And I think this Washington pass rush certainly has a lot to prove. They've only achieved 9 sacks this year through 5 games. So it's not like they've been a world-beating unit, but this is the game where you need to find a way to take advantage. I don't think Kaliakmanis is one of the better dual threat quarterbacks in this conference, but I just look at this matchup, and I think that especially if you're able to get a solid push on the interior, you are going to have an opportunity to throw him off his rhythm, get him scrambling outside the pocket, and with the speed that you have at linebacker, especially if Zydruss Rainey-Saleh is able to suit up and play 20, 30 snaps, I'm really curious to see what that's going to look like in this game as well. You have the talent advantage in the front 7 to take advantage of this matchup. And that's where I really want to talk about Antwan Raymond, because this Washington run defense has been really good this year in terms of the numbers. They're number 4 in the Big Ten right now, having 78 rushing yards per game. but I don't know if that's necessarily let's just call it the best indication of where this unit is. And I think, again, this is a game where we're really going to see that. I think in terms of running back talent that you face, I think Bo Jackson, the freshman at Ohio State, is the best running back you've seen this year. And I think that, in terms of experience, though, and what they've brought to the table this season, I think Antwan Raymond has had a better season to this point, where he's got close to 500 yards. He's second in the conference with 9 touchdowns this year. So I think that that's going to be where I'm just really intrigued with this matchup on the ground because, like I said, 4th in the Big Ten in rushing yards allowed. That's a solid number. And I think with the rotation that Washington has on the interior of the defensive line, there are so many things to like about that matchup. Again, especially with Javon Parker, we'll see what kind of capacity, how many snaps he might be able to take in this game. But I think that Washington has a talent advantage in the trenches in this game. And if you're able to collapse the pocket, and you're able to, especially early on in the game, shut down some of these rushing lanes, and you're able to hold Raymond to, let's just call it 2.5 to 3 yards a carry, which this unit has done a really good job of doing so far this year, I think making Rutgers offense one-dimensional is a big win because, like I said, Kaliakmanis, while he's done a really good job of piling up yards through the air, I think that in a game like this, especially with the cross-country flight and everything, there are going to be some challenges in terms of getting on the same page early on, especially with what's going to be a rockin' Husky Stadium with homecoming and the Mariners game on the screen, which I think is going to be a lot of fun. There are so many things that are working against this Rutgers offense in this matchup. And I do believe that Washington has all the talent necessary to take advantage of that at all 3 levels. Jedd Fisch has done a really good job of building up this roster. And when I look on the outside, I can see Washington's corners doing a good job just smothering these outside receivers. I look on the inside. I'm curious to see what Leroy Bryant does. He was really impressive in the win over Maryland after, a bounce back game following the struggles against Washington State. I want to see if he gets another start in this game where they do turn to Rashawn Clark, see what the snaps look like at the nickel position. I just really like what Washington is doing and what Washington is building. There are certainly a lot of things to improve on, but I think that the second half against Maryland really unlocked some stuff for Ryan Walters in terms of what he's going to be able to call. Because against a senior quarterback like Athan Kaliakmanis, there's going to be a lot of things on the back end that he has certainly seen before. So no matter what kind of coverage it's going to be, whether it is the traditional, we're going to have a 5 down front and play press man on the outside, that's fine. If you're going to drop back, play a little bit more zone, switch things up. There are a lot of different ways to combat what this Rutgers offense wants to do. And I just think that Walters has done a tremendous job of mixing up coverages so far this season and making life hard on quarterbacks. There have been some cases where quarterbacks have still taken advantage of what has been given. But I think as the season has gone on, Walters has and is going to continue to find ways to adjust and just adapt his defense, which is a lot of fun to think about because with what he's been able to do up front and with how Washington has been able to shut down the run so far this season. And that's why I think it's such a big key in this game, because if you're able to continue to do that, I think that this is the game where we can finally see the pass rush click and unlock. And you look at the next couple of games against Michigan and Illinois, it's going to be a little bit tougher to hit home on the quarterbacks, but I just think that this is the kind of game that can give you some confidence moving forward. And again, if Javon Parker is able to play, let's just say it's something like 15 snaps, which I feel like is a good gauge in his first game back from the torn Achilles that he suffered against Rutgers last season. Adding a guy like that to the interior and what he brings, especially as a pass rusher, is an exciting thought for what the ceiling of this defense can be. And if Jacob Lane is able to continue to develop on the outside, if you're able to find somebody else to step up and give you something at outside linebacker, whether it's Isaiah Ward, Devin Hyde, whether it's Deshaun Lynch, or you want to put one of the other guys down there, Hayden Moore, Zajius Rainey-Saleh, we see him take some snaps on the outside, whatever that might look like, if you are able to get this pass rush going, I love what the ceiling of Washington's defense can be, but that's still the biggest question, and that's where this game is going to be won and lost. If you can get off the field on 3rd down, and if you can pressure the quarterback, I think Washington is going to have a tremendous shot of really showing some defensive progress in this game. And maybe we'll have some sacks, some other stuff in the bold prediction. You'll have to stay tuned on the other side of the break to find out. And we'll get there right after a message from our good friends over at Mazda. This episode is brought to you by Mazda's Moving the Game Forward. For those who believe it's not just about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than put points on the board. They move crowds, move culture, and keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward was Desmond Roebuck's 34-yard touchdown reception from Antwan Williams to make it a 3-point game in the fourth quarter. Tremendous throw, tremendous catch in the back of the end zone, and just the momentum that it added to that game. That was such an exciting moment as the Huskies were able to power through and get that 24-20 comeback win at Maryland. That was tremendous, and it really moved the game forward. When you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to a Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. Oh, all right. This is going to be a fun one. I absolutely love these bold predictions like this. So I decided to cook up some extra special ones for all you everydayers out there. And like I said before the break, I wanted to start on the defensive side of the ball, which is just very uncommon for this show. Always like to start on offense, but today we're going to switch it up a little bit here because it's fun and I enjoy doing it. So in this game against Rutgers, my first bold prediction is I have Washington getting 4 sacks in this game against this offensive line that really hasn't proven much this season. I know Washington's pass rush hasn't necessarily proven much either, and this is going to be its coming out party. And to take it a step further, I think one of those sacks is going to come from Tai Uyunglele in this game. I think that it's going to be a huge day for the interior of Washington's defensive line. This is something that I've talked about a lot on the show from the day that some of these guys got here until now, saying, I don't need this group to be elite for this defense to function. But I think on this day, on this Friday, as you everydayers are listening to this, that this is going to be a real coming out party for this interior of the defensive line. I think Antonio Thompson's going to have a nice day. Bryce Butler, Javon Parker, Elenius Davis. I think we're going to see the high-end potential of what the interior of this defensive line is capable of. So I'm really excited about that because I want to tie this together with one other thing. Like I said a little bit earlier, I think Antwan Raymond is one of the best running backs in the Big Ten. And I think this defensive line is going to do a really, really nice job of containing him in this contest. And I think at the end of this game, my second bold prediction is Rutgers is going to be held to under 100 rushing yards in this game. I don't think I've ever gone that far before with one of these, but I really do trust this unit. And I think that the rotation of defensive linemen that Washington can bring to the field, especially now that Javon Parker is back in the group, and whatever limited capability that might be, is going to be enough to get the job done against this offense. And like I said, combining that with pushing the pocket and getting up in Athan Kaliakmanis' face just a little bit, I think that that's going to be enough for this defense to have one of the better days we've seen, as the first half of the season will officially be over by the time the final whistle blows in this game. So I really am excited about what the potential of this defense is, and I think this is a day where they can really show what they can do, because I think down the stretch, when we look past Michigan, past Illinois, who are two of the better teams in this conference, there's going to be a couple of opportunities for UW to really stake its claim as a solid to above average defense in this conference against Purdue, UCLA, Wisconsin, and we'll see if they're able to live up to that challenge. But I think that if you're able to put a nice showing together in this game, that it's going to carry over down the line, because, with the way that Illinois especially has been hurting, with Michigan being a run-first offense with a true freshman quarterback right now, you are going to have opportunities to assert yourself in those games as well. But if you can't do it against Rutgers, I'm not going to bet on it in those games either. But now let's jump over to the offensive side of the ball here, because this is where, our bread is buttered. When we talk about Jedd Fisch, we talk about this podcast as well. And this segment of Bold Predictions, it always starts with one of the members of this big three of Antwan Williams, Denzel Boston, and Jonah Coleman. And I said Jonah, even though, he might be the best player right now of those three, I said his name last because I want to start with him here, where we haven't seen Jonah go over 100 yards on the ground since that second game against UC Davis. We saw him thrive and have 100 receiving yards against Washington State, but he's been held under 70 yards on the ground in each of Washington's last 3 games. I think that changes on Friday. I think that Jonah Coleman is going to go for over 100 yards. I have him at 120, and I think he's going to score twice. I don't know if both of those are going to be on the ground. A little hint there. But I really do believe that Jonah is going to be able to assert his will in a game like this, where I think back to what that 2024 game was against Rutgers, and You can look at the fourth quarter of the Washington State game as well as just one where Jedd said, let's hurt ourselves here a little bit. I know he talked about the Omari Evans touchdown at the end of the game being more of a coverage breakdown than anything else. But I think that this is going to be another one of those matchups where Washington has the advantage whatever way you want to look at it. And all of the red zone struggles, all of the opportunities that you had to get in the end zone in that game last year, with it being Jonah's final season and with the sting of that game certainly being a factor when you talk about just how Washington wanted to prepare for this game this week, especially it being a short week, just leaning heavily on a guy like that, getting him over 100 yards, getting him a couple of touchdowns is going to be crucial. So I want to kind of tie a couple here together because I know I said Rutgers is going to go under 100 yards. Give me Washington over 200 rushing yards as a team in this game. So let's talk about that as it relates to one of the better rushing threats in the country in Antwan Williams. This is going to be a big day for him, in my opinion. When we talk about what this Rutgers defense has done so far this year, it has been underwhelming to say the least. And I like Antwan to go for over 270 passing yards in this game. That's the number I got him at. And give me 60 yards on the ground for Antwan in this contest as well, with 4 total touchdowns. Where, again, we look at this game last year and how Jedd Fisch was able to find ways to exploit holes in a much better Greg Schiano defense than what this one is. I think that we're going to see some of those things come to fruition. Antwan has been such an efficient passer this year. So I'll get to Denzel Boston here in a second. I really like the way that he's just been able to build chemistry with so many of these receivers outside of Denzel, whether it be Braden Vinesbright, Desmond Roebuck, Decker DeGraff. There are so many talented weapons for Washington to utilize in the passing game. And Antwan is, again, not only just done a really good job at being efficient and keeping his completion percentage high, he's done a good job protecting the ball too. We saw him throw his first interception of the season last week against Maryland. I think he's going to play another clean game here. Give me under half of an interception. I'm just throwing that one out there. But I really do think that Antwan is such a coachable player as well. You look at every single game he's played, you've seen him get better in whatever area you want to point at, whether it be decisions of when to run, how to throw the ball away. We saw him do a much better job of that against Maryland, especially as the game wore on. We've seen him improve in at least one area of his game each and every week. And as he continues to, as our buddy Jake Butt said earlier in the week, he just, as he gets to the back half of what would be a freshman season of starting, there are just so many things to like about the way he is progressing, and he is absolutely on track to wind up as one of the best quarterbacks in the conference by the end of the season, and he could assert himself as one of the best quarterbacks in the country by that point as well. And I think this could be a really big game for him with a national audience and everything like that. I think Antwan is going to assert himself in a big way in this game. So again, 270 passing yards, 60 rushing yards, 4 total touchdowns. And at least 100 of those yards and one of those touchdowns is going to go to Denzel Boston. He was dominant in this game last year. We had the 51-yard catch and run touchdown. I know he had a pair of touchdowns in that game. I look at that one. Both of those touchdowns came against Robert Longerbeam, who was, in my opinion, the best NFL prospect on that defense last season. He did a tremendous job against them. And I look at the corners that Rutgers has in this in the matchup this year. I don't think they stack up very well with what Denzel brings to the table, with his size, his ability to go up and high point the football, his route running, his ability to break away. He's got great yard after the catch ability, as we saw in this game last season. And I think this is something where we look at Denzel's last couple of weeks. He was tremendous late in the game against Maryland. Obviously, Ohio State did a good job of shutting him down with some of the athletes they have on the defensive side of the ball. I think that this is going to be a get-right day for Denzel to just kind of make up for his last performance in Husky Stadium. So over 100 yards and a touchdown. I've seen some things saying, he hasn't had, the start to the season that you'd want to for someone who's a potential first-round draft pick. But I really do believe that there's just so much left in the tank for Denzel. And as we start to see some of these other options develop, whether it be Braden Vinesbright, Desmond Roebuck, Decker DeGraff had a career day last week against Maryland, I think that all that is going to do is open things up for Denzel Boston as we start to get into the second half of the season here. And defenses are going to be forced to respect some of these other options a little bit more, where Ohio State is the main one, where they knew, okay, this is the guy we cannot allow to beat us in the pass game. And we saw that pay off where Desmond Roebuck was the leading receiver for Washington in that game. And I think Rutgers is going to have a similar strategy, but especially after we saw the late touchdown from Roebuck last week, they're going to have to respect some of the other options that Demond Williams can go to a little bit more. And I think that's going to result in a big day for number 12. All right. Now I've got two more to get to here. One of them is super duper bold. I wanted to go with a Locked On Huskies tradition of a first career touchdown here, but I wanted to have a little bit more fun than that, where one guy who I mentioned a little bit earlier in the week, as you everydayers know, is freshman wide receiver Chris Lawson. This is a guy who, coming into the season, I thought was going to be a much bigger part of the offense, kind of like what we've seen from Desmond Roebuck, but he missed most of fall camp with an injury, and now we've seen him play in a couple games so far this year. We saw him get a couple of catches against UC Davis, and then we saw him come in for a couple of snaps against Maryland as well, and that's where I'm going with this. I think Chris Lawson, my Super Bowl prediction, is he is going to have 2 catches in this game. Now, while that might not sound like a lot for a third true freshman to play in a third game and seemingly be on track to burn his red shirt by that point in time, I'm really excited about what that could look like, because this is a guy who you go back and you watch the game against UC Davis and you watch the film against Maryland as well. He's someone who they're having run some of these deeper clear out routes. And I'm curious to see if we're going to see his role evolve in the offense, if we might see Demond Williams take a deep shot or two to him, because this is a guy who this coaching staff, you ask any member of this offensive staff about him, they are so excited about what he brings to the table. And I don't know if we're going to call this a breakout game, but this is going to be a game for Chris Lawson, in my opinion, where we look back on it at the end of the night and say, oh yeah, this is going to be a guy who, next year in 2026, assuming Denzel Boston does depart early for the NFL draft, hey, he's someone who you got to keep an eye on as potential starter, a much bigger piece of this rotation. And if we see him just get a nice start on that in this game against a big time opponent, I think that would be really, really big. All right, last one. As all the everydayers know, like I said off the top, I'm a huge jinx, so I don't do score predictions. The last one that I did out loud was the Montana game, and obviously that ended poorly. So I don't do that. But shout out to our good friends over at FanDuel who have Washington as a 10.5 point favorite in this game. Not touching that either. But I will say I have in my preseason predictions where I have the Huskies going 9-3, I had Washington winning this game, so I'm going to stick with that. I want to talk about another line from FanDuel, and that's the over-under in this game, which is set right now at 60.5. You know what? Life is short. Take the over. I'm really excited about what this could look like because, like I said earlier, I think Washington's offense just has the explosive ability to put up a lot of points early against this Rutgers defense. So I like Washington a lot in this matchup. Like I said, preseason prediction and all that. That's as far as I'm going to go with that. But I look at the way points could be scored in this game, and I think the Huskies, led by that trio that I just talked about, have the ability to put up a lot of points in this game, and maybe with a Mariners win too. We'll see what that looks like. It could be a good night for the city of Seattle. But that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. If you like what we got to offer, please make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcast. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click the little bell so you never miss when we post a new show. Plus, if you're audio only, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review, as it does help us a lot. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comments section. And with that being said, we'll talk to you after the game.